The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here today. We're just going to wait 1 or 2 more minutes to let everyone have some time to get in and get settled for the webinar, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you. All right, hi, welcome everyone. I'm Matt Tonkin, and today I'm going to be presenting the top 5 things to know about ELDs. Before I get started, I just want to apologize. I've been suffering from a bit of a cold the last few days, so hopefully there's no coughing on my part, and I apologize in advance if I do that. So I'd just like to point out before we get going that if you want, you can ask questions in the dialog box on the software that you're watching the program through. We'll be able to get to these at the end of the presentation. We have a time designated for questions, so we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. As some of you probably have heard, the ELD mandate has cleared the House, so it is ready to be published by the FMCSA. As of today, it hasn't been published, but we're expecting that shortly. So that's just sort of to give you a heads up on what we're working on going forward. So the information that we're based this on is the information from the proposed mandate that we've had a chance to read over the last several months. So that's where we're coming from. There could be changes once the mandate's actually published, but we don't think there'll be too many. So start out a little bit about BigRoad. BigRoad has been making logs for drivers for about 5 years now. Started around the end of 2011, going into 2012, so 4 or 5 years. And BigRoad really focuses on making logs that drivers like to use. That's sort of the best tactic we find. If you can make something that drivers really want to use on their day-to-day routes, you're going to be a lot more successful in getting them to sort of get on to the logs and really take advantage of what options are available when you're using electronic logs. So that's sort of where we're coming from. We moved into making engine connected logs earlier this year, releasing our DashLink device, which is an AOBRD to run as an engine connected device. All right, so moving on to the things you want to know about ELDs. Well, the very first thing to know is don't panic. There's still a lot of time, even with the mandate clearing the House and looking to be published probably in the next couple weeks. There's still lots of time, so it's not time to panic. It's just time to get informed and know what you're going to do once you have to make these decisions. So here's the timeline that we're looking at for the ELD mandate. Right now we're looking at it being published in this month. I've heard different things from different media outlets. Some people say December 7th is the big date now. Not entirely certain. We do expect it to be in the next couple weeks before the end of the year for sure. But as with any publication from the FMCSA, it's always hard to tell. One indication is that the FMCSA did recently publish the anti-driver coercion rules, and that has sort of been a roadblock for the ELD mandate for the last little while. So that's a pretty good indicator that we're going to be looking at seeing the ELD mandate published pretty soon with that. So a big question has been how long everyone has once the ELD mandate is published to get in compliance with it. Well, what we're looking at right now is that you're going to have a 2-year window from the publication date. So if that is going to be in the next week or so, you're looking at December 2017 is the date in which companies are going to have to be running ELDs. Now, there is one exception to that rule, and that's if you're running a supported AOBRD system before the 2-year period is up. So that's basically out there to give companies that move to an AOBRD system before that timeline. It's not going to punish them by making them switch to an ELD system and possibly make them have to pay more money when they're already using an engine connected log. So that's kind of why that's been put in place to help out those companies. All right, the next thing you need to know about ELD is the terminology involved with it. There's a lot of confusion in the industry about what exactly these different terms mean. So in terms of electronic logs, I just want to go over some of the different names and acronyms for these different devices that you should know to help differentiate from them. So you can see the first one up there is an electronic logbook, or e-logs as they're called. An important thing to know about electronic logbooks is that these are the non-engine connected logs. So these are, from a BigRoad perspective, this is just the BigRoad app without DashLink or engine connected device. So realistically, these are just the same as paper logs, only you're doing them in a digital form. So that's the big difference there. Now, the three that people are going to get really confused about, and I'll admit even I get confused about them from time to time, are the next three there. EOBR, which is Electronic Onboard Recorder, AOBRD, which is an automatic onboard recording device, and ELD, which is an electronic logging device. Now, one of the big things to note is that ELDs technically don't really exist yet because the FMCSA mandate hasn't been published yet. So if anyone out there is saying that they have an ELD right now, it's not exactly true because we don't have the final written rules on what those are going to be like. So what we tend to say is we're going to have an electronic logging, an ELD ready device. But what BigRoad with DashLink is falls under the title of an AOBRD, which is in that third column there. So these have really been around since the late 80s, the legislation for them. So they're what most of your engine connected logs that you see in the industry today are. Falling in with them are EOBRs, which aren't used so much anymore, but they fall under that similar category. If you look at this chart, you can sort of see what the differences are with them. One of the big ones to note is GPS. So with an electronic logbook, since they're usually used from someone's smartphone, they're using GPS to find the locations for the logs when they're creating them. Now, this isn't something that's necessarily necessary with an AOBRD or an EOBR, but it is something that's going to be required within the ELD legislation. So it's a small thing, but it's important to note just the little differences between these two, because if you're not aware of what's going to be required for the new upcoming rules, if your current AOBRD is going to fit with the electronic logging device rules, you won't know how to proceed forward. So we're going to actually make this chart just a quick go-to available after the webinar so that you can use it as a reference point. Okay, so let's look at what some of the pros and cons of these different types are. And I'm going to start out with paper because it's by far the most common in the industry. From numbers we've heard, still about 80% of drivers are using paper day to day, so it's by far the most common. The pros of paper is that it's editable. There's No difficulty. If you've made a mistake, you can go back and fix it very easily. And it's familiar. Like I said, 80% of drivers are using it. Everyone knows how to do it. It's not that big a deal. The problem with paper is that it can be messy. And we've talked with law enforcement that say, like, if you have a messy log, it's immediately going to make them less inclined to be a bit more forgiving with you, because it just makes their job harder. So having a messy log is going to make it a lot more likely that you're going to get violations. They're also error prone. Human error is a big cause of violations, whether it's just form and manner, not filling out something properly. Things like that are what are going to cause these errors with paper, and they're time consuming. It takes a fair bit out of your day to sit down and draw all these lines, make sure you've got all the times correct, do the math, make sure you're not running over, and do these various things. So that's some of the problems that we're seeing with paper logs. Now, electronic logbook, and again, I'll remind you that this means the non-engine connected digital logbook. So the BigRoad app without an engine connection. Pros of this are they produce neat, clean logs. They're very easy to read. They give all your broken down. They break down all of your numbers without you having to do any work. They're going to give warnings about errors as well. So if a driver hasn't filled something out, they're going to get a warning that reminds them to do that. And also with BigRoad, people in the office are going to get those warnings too, so that they can remind their drivers what they need to do to make sure that their log is being compliant. It also saves time. The logs are being automatically created, so when every change of duty status, the driver isn't spending that, even if it's just a couple minutes, drawing that line and writing all that information in. They don't have to do that. It's being automatically done for them. So it's really, those minutes are adding up on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, saving the driver time. And with an electronic logbook, they are actually editable. This is something that gets a lot of confusion because people don't realize that if it's not an engine connected logbook, they are just as editable as a paper log. So that's one of the pluses of that. The big con with this is that you might want to have a printer, and this is because an inspector can ask for a printed copy of the log. We find that most of the time it's fine. Most officers are willing to take the log on the screen of the device, or they're willing to let it be emailed to them or faxed. But there are some states, particularly Missouri, that pretty much every time you're going to be asked to print that log and have the ability to print. BigRoad does have the ability to print, but you do have to have that printer with you in order to do so. So that's the big drawback of an electronic logbook, is the printer. Now, when you're moving on to an ELD or an AOBRD as it currently is, it has all the same great features that an electronic logbook have. And the big additional plus is that you don't need a printer. If you're running on an engine connected log, no printer needed, you're good to go. But the big difference with them is that there's very limited editing, particularly with drive time. You're not going to be able to make those edits if you and that's really because it's supposed to be coming from the engine itself. That's what's telling the device how long you've been driving for. So you're not gonna have that ability to edit. Any edits you do make are going to be retained as part of the rules, so that you have to keep records of the original log as created from the engine of the vehicle. All right. So number 3, this is another big one, is who is going to have to comply with the mandate. So I think the best way to go about this is to sort of look at the 3 most common questions we're asked about if someone is going to have to comply with a mandate or not. The first big one we're getting is, we're only a fleet of 1 or 2 drivers, or even I'm a single owner operator. Am I going to have to use an ELD? And the straightforward answer is yes, you are. There's no exemption in the rules as proposed that's going to allow for a single driver or a small fleet to have an exemption. That's how the rules are. It's regardless of size. The next big question is, we're running older trucks. We don't have an electronic connection. Are we going to be forced to use a device that we can't actually put into our truck as is? And again, unfortunately, it's looking like, yes, you are going to have to do that, at least in terms of what we have in the proposed mandate. Now, I know a lot of the feedback with this was that there needs to be some sort of um, legislation in there in regards to non-electronic engines and how the ELD mandate is going to affect them. But right now, it's looking like you're going to have to find some way to run a device on a mechanical engine truck, whether that's some sort of aftermarket device like an axle counter, something that's able to get that information and transmit it. So unfortunately, yes, you likely are going to have to run an ELD. The next most common one is we run local trips within the 100-mile air radius with only an occasional longer trip. And here actually is the one exemption. That 100-mile air radius exemption, which you see now for regular logs now, is going to continue with ELDs. So if you are only driving locally, you're not going to have to run an ELD. Now, it gets a little murkier when you look into the occasional longer trip. There is going to be some exemption there where if you only do a few trips per month, you'll be allowed to just use regular paper logs to fill out the logs for the days that you're gone. Now, there's going to be a limit on that so that people aren't taking advantage of that. I believe the limit was around 8 days out of every 30. I'm not sure if that's going to be a rolling limit or if that's going to be a monthly limit, but that's about what we're looking at. So if you are only doing an occasional trip, you probably won't have to get an ELD at this point. So basically, the best way to look at this is to do what we call the ELD rule of thumb. And that is, if you're currently required to maintain logs for your record of duty status, you'll most likely be required to have an ELD. So basically, if you're already keeping paper logs, you're gonna need an ELD. That's about what the rules sort of stipulate. There's no further exemptions. Really, you can look at it as just saying replacing driver logs with ELD now. That's the big difference. So the next thing everyone wants to know are what are the business risks, particularly the risks and some of the benefits associated with ELDs. There's a lot of concern about how companies are going to manage to keep up once ELDs are in place. So here what we see is some of the biggest concerns about ELDs. The first one being safety scores. Companies are concerned that now that they're under more scrutiny with ELDs, their logs are connected to the engine, drivers are going to get caught cheating, their safety scores are going to be hurt, and their business is going to suffer because of that. A few things to consider here. Yes, if your drivers are cheating, then you're likely going to take a hit from this, because if they can't adjust by the time the ELD mandate's in place, well, then yes, they're probably going to start getting caught, because the ELDs are going to pick up on that. One thing to note though is that everyone is in the same boat. So yes, you might have drivers who are getting caught more, but everyone else is. So everyone's going to have to start following the rules with this, or their safety scores are going to be hurt. The next, on that same sort of vein, is the loss of business. Companies are concerned that they're not going to be able to keep up with their competitors now that they're having to follow these rules. And again, going on the same line of everyone's going to have to do this. Your competitors aren't going to be out there just getting a competitive advantage over you, because they're on the same boat. They have to use an ELD as well. And if they're not, they're going to get caught, and they're going to get in trouble. And really that just opens it up for the companies that are doing it properly and are using the ELDs in a way that they can take advantage of. The third big concern is, of course, what's the cost going to be? And this is a valid concern. You never want to add more business costs to or more overhead. So the big concern, I can tell you from BigRoad's standpoint, it's very inexpensive. Right now, we're running at $15 per month per driver. $15 per month per driver for the BigRoad web app, which allows you full access to your driver logs, GPS tracking of where all your trucks and drivers are, and a huge amount of other features. And then on top of that, you would need $10 a month per DashLink device we have out there. So all in all, you're looking at about $25 a month per driver. Which, yeah, that's definitely going to add some overhead. But when you put into the context of all of your different costs, fuel, maintenance on vehicles, it's actually a pretty small percentage of your total overhead. I can't speak for all the other ELD companies out there. It's gonna vary from place to place. Some have a large overhead in terms of the devices that they're putting in have to be hardwired in, so there's an installation fee, or they have to they pay a lot of money up front for the device. So that's something you're going to have to take into consideration when you're choosing what kind of device you're going to want. But with BigRoad, there's no upfront cost like that. It's ongoing monthly fees, so you can build it into your operation costs. And finally, the big one we're hearing about is drivers quitting. I know we hear it a lot that drivers are saying, I'm gone when this happens. No way I'll plug that in. That's a big concern because they're really the lifeblood of the company. If you can't get someone to drive, and we already know, we hear about it day in, day out about a driver shortage. And if this is going to cause more drivers to leave, how are you going to be able to keep up with all the business? And that's really a big concern. I know from BigRoad's perspective, we've had lots of customers over the years who tell us that when they first tried to get electronic logs in with their fleet, their drivers pushed back a lot, and now their drivers wouldn't live without it. So it's really a matter of easing the drivers into it and getting them something that they're able to use. And yeah, there probably is going to be a few drivers who do quit because of it. I'm sure there's some that it's not a empty threat, but for the most part, I think most drivers, once they start using it, are going to appreciate them and enjoy them. All right, so now moving on to the benefits, and we've still got safety score on here as a risk and a benefit, and that's because this will actually help you improve your safety score if you're using it properly. If drivers are using their ELDs properly, following the regulations, not going over their hours, they're going to have neat logs that are going to go through inspections, and they're going to pass, and that's going to help improve your safety score, and that's going to help you from a business perspective too. You're going to look better when someone's looking for someone to ship with. Customer service. So one of the big things that having this type of system does for you, you know where your trucks are, you know when they're going to get to a place. So that's something you can really pass on to your customers. If you know exactly how long your drivers got left to drive, you can give a better, accurate answer of when your customer is going to receive their package. So that's a big thing to consider when you think about what benefits you can get out of this. Efficiency is a big one. Going through logs day in and day out of just loose leaf paper logs is a lot of work. If you can have that all digitized and in a archive just on your computer, it takes a lot of the stress out of going through and filing everything. So it makes things quicker. There's also things like automated reports, particularly with BigRoad. We offer state mileage reports. So if you're looking to file, do IFTA filing, you can generate all your state mileage for all your drivers broken down by states and who the drivers were, things like that. So that produces very easily, quick. It's basically a couple clicks and you've got a full report. We also do driver hour reporting. So again, if you're paying your drivers any hourly rates, or you just want to see how long they're driving, that's a simple report to run. And that's really one of the big benefits that these give you from a business perspective, is all that data that you can use to improve your business function and really make you run more efficiently. One big thing, and this sort of ties in with the idea of drivers leaving, is driver incentives. You want to have the best drivers out there. So if you're able to run incentive programs for your drivers, perhaps drivers without any errors in their logs get some sort of incentive, whether it's pay or something like that, that's really going to be a useful tool for you to make sure you have the best drivers out there. And it's also going to make good drivers want to come and drive for you. So that's a big thing to. That's something you can take advantage of when you're using this information that ELDs provide you. So the next big thing is the steps of how you're going to pick an ELD and how you're going to make your transition plan to ELDs from whatever you're using now. If you're using paper logs, you're probably going to see this be the biggest step for you. So the first thing I'd like to start by is talking about the transition plan. And the first step you've got to do there is research, and that's exactly what you're doing right now. Is you're listening to me talk about ELDs. You're doing your research right now, so it's a good first step. But I encourage you to go out there, look at all the different options, and make sure you know exactly what's best for you, because it is your business. You know best what is going to work for you and how your drivers or yourself are going to react to these different solutions. So that's the first step in all this. Next, once you have that the device you want to use chosen, we suggest you pick your best drivers and start with them. And best drivers doesn't necessarily mean the drivers who are getting the furthest in a day. It's the drivers who you think are going to take to ELDs the easiest, because you're not going to have as much problems with them. Maybe someone who's a bit more tech savvy than most. These are the drivers that are going to have the easiest time transitioning to ELDs. And work with those drivers between you and them to see how it's working. Make sure that you both know what you're doing. And then once you've worked through sort of the kinks in those processes with those drivers, then it's time to sort of move on to the drivers who you think you're going to have a harder time with. And we consider this a staged rollout. So what you want to do is sort of, depending on the size of your fleet, it might be just a staggered 1 or 2 drivers every couple months, or if you have a large fleet, it might be quite a bit more than that. But what you want to do is sort of move to ELDs in groups. This helps you sort of not just take a huge plunge, but it lets you gradually take care of any issues that come up, figure out how to work with the ELDs, and find out what works best for you and your company. And if there is feedback from drivers or pushback from drivers, it's going to let you sort of handle it one-on-one and not get into a situation where you've got 13, 14, 50 drivers coming up to you saying that they hate it and want to leave or something along those lines. So that's really the best way to do this. All right, so now I'm going to tell you a bit why we think BigRoad is the best answer for this. And the big thing comes down to it's a technology that drivers like to use. Drivers find it easy to use BigRoad to complete their logs. They're liking it day in and day out. So that really goes back to what I was talking about with the stage rollout. If you can find something that drivers are comfortable using, that's going to be half the battle for you. You don't have to worry so much about driver pushback. They're really going to be comfortable with the device, and that makes it easier for you to figure out how it's working for you. If you're a driver yourself, I encourage you to download the BigRoad app. It's a free app. You can use it to try and make some logs with it and see if you like it yourself. And that's really the best way to find out. I'd encourage fleet managers to get some of their drivers to download it too, to try it out, because that really is the best way to find out if something's going to work for you. It won't be the engine connected version, but it does give you a pretty good idea of how the drivers use the app and why it works so well for them. I mentioned earlier about the cost being $15 a month per driver for the fleet side of BigRoad. So that's really low in terms of your overhead. And again, with engine connected, BigRoad is only going to be about $25 a month total. So you have low cost. It's easy to get deployed. So you don't have to worry from that perspective. The next big thing is BigRoad's really, our main focus is on safety and compliance. Everything within the app is geared around making sure that you're in compliance with the logs, that it helps teach drivers what they need to know to maintain compliance. They're getting notifications if they haven't filled something in properly. From a fleet perspective, you're able to see what drivers you have out there in violations. If you have a driver whose log isn't filled in properly and they're driving, they're going to be top of your list, and you can reach out to them to say, hey, before you get pulled over, you need to fix this so that we don't get a violation and get dinged. Next thing is that it's really a minimal effort. It's very easy to get BigRoad to get it installed. To install our DashLink system, it's really just a matter of less than 5 minutes, if that. You plug it into the diagnostic port, you open the app on your phone, and you connect it, and that's all there is to it. It's really quick. It's really easy to run with it. And then the next big thing is letting fleet managers and drivers work together through BigRoad. Our messaging system within the app is a big thing that lets you instantly message your drivers, then message you to make sure you're working together on things. Drivers can take images of documentations, whether it's a bill of lading or a fuel receipt, and they can send that directly to the fleet office so that they can get their pay quickly. They can do all sorts of things and remain in constant communication through the app. Also, fleet managers have instant access to their logs, so drivers aren't going to have to find a place to fax a log. They're not going to be sending emails day in and day out when it's just automatically done for them. That's part of the process that makes it easier for them, and it makes it easier for the fleet manager who doesn't want to be hunting a driver down. So these are the big reasons that BigRoad is a great answer if you're looking to make the step towards ELD. And in terms of, I want to go back to the starting and transition plan. That's something we really encourage is if you don't want to make the jump right now to engine connected, making the start with just the BigRoad app is a great way to make that transition, get drivers used to using a non-engine connected but electronic log. And that's going to make the jump to an ELD that much easier once you get to it. All right, so thank you for listening to my raspy voice through all that. Right now, I'm going to be answering some questions. Alexandra is here with me, and she's going to be helping to curate the questions. And again, if you have more questions, be sure to answer them in that. Throw them into that question box. We probably won't have time to get through all of them today. Hopefully we can get through as many as possible. But if we don't, we will be making a blog post of this, which includes a recording of the webinar, and it will also have the answers to those questions. And also right there, you see a link. That's our ELD ebook. If you go to that link, you'll be able to download a copy of our ELD ebook, which will provide you with a lot of the information I've given you today, but in a bit more mobile package so that you can share it with people. All right, Alexandra.
Hello, everyone. We've had a number of questions asking about, when is the ELD mandate coming and who is it going to impact? So I know we've talked about it again, but just to recap, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. So we don't have a super hard deadline right now for when it's going to happen, but we do think the actual publication date will be within the next few weeks. The mandate recently cleared the House, so that's really the last hurdle before the FMCSA publishes it. So timeline-wise, we're looking at probably in the next couple weeks to be published. From there, most companies are going to have a 2-year window to get on ELDs. There is an exception for companies already using an AOBRD, but for the most part, 2017, December of 2017 is the date that you're looking at to be running an ELD. In terms of who is going to be running an ELD, I said it earlier, the rule of thumb is really if you or your drivers have to maintain a record of duty status logs right now, you're going to have to be using an ELD. There's going to be some exceptions to that, but that's really the easiest way to break it down.
Thanks, Matt. We've also had a number of questions about the transition. So some people are using BigRoad, some are using other e-logs, some are still using paper. What would you say is the transition, and what is the time frame to comply?
Well, if you're already using BigRoad, I would say the transition is to, depending on your position, but if you're managing a fleet with several drivers, I think one of the important things to do would be to get in touch with our business development team here, you can do that by if you visit our website. Our phone number is 1-888-305-8777. Yes, that's right. Sorry, I don't have that in front of me at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that's the number. So if you contact them, they can get started. And I would suggest maybe starting with a couple DashLink units for some of your drivers. If you are a BigRoad user and you're a driver, you can do the same thing, contact in and get your hands on a DashLink system. And that's going to give you experience of an engine connected log before you actually have to comply. So that's the best step there. For people using other types of e-logs, well, I guess I kind of want to say switch to BigRoad, but really I think you should just look into the different options that are out there for yourself, and really making that slow transition before you're forced to by the government is probably the key, because that lets you do it sort of on your own timeline rather than scrambling in 2 years' time to do so.
So we've also had a question. What if I send the driver with the 7 days prior? Do I still need a printer?
So I think that this means if you send the driver with printed selection of the 7 previous days, and yes, you kind of do, just because of the fact that you're going to have to print that current day. Some inspectors are very picky on this. Honestly, for the most part, you probably get through 80 to 90% of inspections without an inspector really forcing the issue on having a printer. But we really have to recommend that you should keep a printer with you.
And in that vein, we have another question. They use a lot of part-time drivers. Can they enter in their 7 days prior themselves without having to go through the back office? Some of them have other jobs and just can't enter off-duty logs.
Right. So yes, using the BigRoad app, they can actually do that. It'll the previous 7 days or so will show up in the app as off-duty. If there's any information they want to put in, they'll just have to go back and put it in themselves, but they can create those previous logs themselves.
Do you include DVIR with the software?
Yeah, so as part of the app, drivers can do their daily inspections just from the app itself. It's a matter of going into the edit logs function within the app, and then they can start a new inspection, and they can go from there. That creates inspection, and those inspections are then available from the fleet side of the software.
Another question is, who will be training law enforcement?
That's a good question. We've actually been working with a lot of law enforcement recently, because we want to help them understand sort of the different aspects of our logs and where we're coming from. I know our most recent one was actually with the Ontario Provincial Police in Barrie, Ontario, Canada. We gave some presentations to them on how to handle the logs when they're making stops, things like that. We're also pretty active in different organizations. We are a member of the CVS, associate member of the CVSA. So we're working to make sure that inspectors know what they're doing when they get these logs. So that's a really important thing to us. We're always talking with different inspectors. We had a webinar in October with a sergeant from the Tennessee Highway Patrol. So working with, so we want to make sure that we're doing our part to help these inspectors learn, but we do think it's also going to be something that the government's going to have to be sure to step in to make sure that the inspectors know what they're doing, and that they're not giving drivers violations simply because they're not aware of how to use the equipment.
Just to add to that, if you're interested in learning more about the OPP event that we were part of last week, I will be posting a blog to our website about, shortly after the webinar. So check out our social media. So if you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Google+, there will be the link. So you'll be able to check out our experience from there. So that happened last week in Ontario, Canada. Next question is, if multiple drivers use one truck, is there a cost reduction?
Well, in terms of if they both are using DashLink, you really only need one DashLink unit. So from that perspective, there would be they don't have to have two different DashLinks. But we do charge based on the number of drivers within the system. So it's our fees are based on drivers instead of the number of trucks.
If you're curious, I would also recommend contacting our business development team, because that's not really a question or something that we have access to. So, I mean, it is based on users, but I would suggest reaching out and having a conversation about us with that. The next question is asking about the size of the plugin for DashLink, and are there any cords?
Yeah, so I'll try to explain what it looks like best as I can. So the DashLink unit, apart from the phone or mobile device that the driver is using, is sort of a two-part piece. The first is the connection cord, which is going to have either whatever connection you're using for the bus that comes from the engine, and then attached to that is a cord which runs to the DashLink transmitting unit, which is a small, probably 4-inch by 3-inch rectangle, which is going to you can mount that up underneath your dash, and that's what connects to your phone or device to using Bluetooth.
It's just another question related to printing. So why does the state of Missouri still demanding to print out logs when others don't?
Honestly, that's a question we ask ourselves here a lot. We don't know. It's based on Missouri's interpretation of the FMCSA DOT guidelines. We've heard other states who, in particular certain jurisdictions, that do it too, but Missouri definitely is the one that we hear about the most. Honestly, it's just the way that they interpret the rules. They are completely within the legislative rights to ask for a printed copy, but we know we consider it a bit pointless when the information is the exact same. But that is how the legislation is written, so that's within their right to do so.
Is the BigRoad app an ELD or only an E-log? How do we connect to the engine?
All right, so I'll start that out by saying technically there's no ELDs yet. I mentioned earlier, ELDs won't technically exist until the mandate has been published. So what the BigRoad app, when you're not using an engine connected, is considered an electronic logbook. If you want to connect to an engine, you can get our DashLink unit. And using DashLink would make BigRoad an AOBRD. That's sort of, you can think of as the precursor to ELDs. So that's sort of the difference between the two. Just using the app won't make you compliant with ELDs for the future. You're going to have that engine connection.
And going off that, we had a question. Can anyone attach the system, so I'm assuming the DashLink, to the truck, or is there a vendor fee required to install the system?
No, it's super easy to attach the unit to your truck, provided that you have the right connection for your bus. It's just a matter of plugging the device into your truck and then turning on your phone, and it'll be connected. And that's about as simple as there is to it. There's no installation fee. It's all part of that monthly fee.
And then we're getting a couple of questions about the monthly fee and kind of the difference between DashLink and the app and the subscription.
Right. Try to cover it as best as I can. So there's sort of two parts to the monthly fee. You have your driver user fee. So this is $15 a month per driver for your fleet. So you're going to be looking at, say you had 3 drivers in your fleet, you're going to be paying $15 a month for each driver to have access to all their logs in the back end. So the GPS tracking, a lot of these features. Now the DashLink fee is a rental fee for each DashLink unit. So say you had those same 3 drivers, but you only had 2 trucks. Well, you don't really need a third DashLink, right? Because you only have the 2 trucks. So you're going to only necessarily need to pay for 2 of those DashLinks. Obviously, this is going to vary a lot based on what your current setup is, how many trucks you have, how you operate. But that's sort of the gist of it. $15 per month per driver. And then Dashlink rentals are $10 a month.
What are the log requirements for short haul operations for passenger carrying vehicles, and what would be the case when the company exceeds the short haul mileage?
Okay, so I'll admit here that I'm not as well versed on passenger carry rules, um, but if you're within the short haul exemption, you're likely going to follow under that exemption that I talked about earlier, where you probably won't have to use ELDs. So if you're not regularly doing logs now, you shouldn't have to do ELDs. If you are going outside of that air mile radius, there is an exemption built in to the regulations that's going to allow you to switch to paper for a certain amount per month. Now, you won't be able to do a lot of trips every month under that regulation, but it does sort of save you from having to invest in an ELD system if you only are going to be using it, if you're not going to be needing to use it very regularly.
Another question is around sharing a dash link. So if there are multiple users using one dash link, what happens when the hardware gets taken out? Does it retain the data? Is it lost? Kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so currently there's no real problem with sharing the dash links. Each individual device is able to connect to the driver's phone, and that's where the information is being stored. So drivers can switch between using the dash link, it's moving it from different trucks. It's reading the vehicle's VIN numbers, so that's how it differentiates what truck it is in. So you're not going to be running into problems if drivers are switching between dash link themselves. So you should be fine on that front.
What is the support that BigRoad offers for Dashlink or even app users?
Yeah, so we have here a great support team that is working constantly to make sure that all our users are getting the best support they can. You can reach them again by dialing into our number or emailing them at support@bigroad.com. And they're going to help you through all the process. If you're having trouble installing the Dashlink, they're going to be working with you to make sure you know how to do it and really offer up their guidance. So yeah, if you're running Dashlink, you're going to have full access to our support. So don't worry about that. We've got you covered there.
I would also mention that most of the calls that we do get into support necessarily aren't about any questions about the app or anything, but I would say mostly understanding what the laws and hours of service, just because they vary so greatly. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to send them through, but I believe that's all that we have for questions right now.
All right, so I'd like to thank everyone for coming in today. Again, we will be posting a video recap of this. So thank you for coming in today, and I hope this was informative for you. And we'll definitely be keeping everyone up to date on any updates that come across in terms of the ELD mandate.
And I would just like to remind everyone that, as I mentioned earlier, we will be posting a new blog shortly, and it's going to be talking about our experience with the OPCVC, which was the OPP event where we were with law enforcement talking about ELDs and electronic logging. So feel free to check that out. That'll be posted shortly. And I also do recommend liking our Facebook page. We get a lot of great comments, a lot of great conversation on there from fellow drivers and different people within the industry. Following us on Twitter at BigRoad Inc., following us on LinkedIn as well as Google+. Thanks very much.